What you are seeing is not in some distant country, nor is it during the pandemic, but in America, at Walmart right now. No more shelves piled high with goods, no more checkout counters with long lines of people waiting their turn. Instead, there are empty shelves, skyrocketing prices, and increasingly limited choices. And what makes many Americans feel the most anxious is not just the lack of a specific item, but the helplessness of not being able to control what is happening to their daily lives. In today's video, we will explore the 10 groups of Americans most affected as shelves become empty, supply chains are at risk of disruption, and stores are significantly reducing their operations. You might find yourself in there, or come across the image of a relative or neighbor. A gentle reminder, this video is analytical and exploratory in nature, based on real phenomena and reputable public data. We do not intend to accuse or criticize any individual or organization. Let's start with the first group. In many quiet neighborhoods across America, there are elderly people living alone in homes that were once filled with laughter, but now only echo with the ticking of clocks and the hum of refrigerators with a few leftover odds and ends. A loaf of white bread, a small bottle of milk, and a few apples, once a simple breakfast, have now become a luxury for them. I went to 3 shops but couldn't find the exact type of bread I usually eat. My legs hurt, my car is old, and there's no one to help me, shared a 78-year-old woman living alone in a small town in Iowa. And I know there are many other elderly people who are in the same situation. While many people can order online or drive to the big supermarket on the outskirts of the city, millions of elderly Americans do not have that option. With a fixed income from Social Security, health that is no longer what it used to be, and limited transportation, they cannot drive dozens of miles to find a cheaper store. They live alone, have difficulty moving around, and depend on small local shops. And when the familiar stores close or raise prices due to shortages and lack of staff to operate, the elderly can only sigh and choose to buy less or even skip meals. If the supply chain is disrupted, young people can manage because at least they still have their health and enough time to earn extra income. But the elderly can only wait. They not only lose their familiar items, but also the peace of mind that there will always be milk to drink, over-the-counter medicine to buy, and nutritious food for dinner. Food crises do not always manifest in numbers or protests. Sometimes, it manifests in monotonous, nutrient-deficient meals. In the feeling of anxiety when looking at the new meat price tags, or when not finding the familiar dishes that used to be associated with a simple old age. It seeps into physical health and gradually erodes the spirit. For elderly people living alone, each empty shelf is not just a disappointment, but also a painful reminder. Am I gradually being left behind in this world, in a country that prides itself on its unparalleled prosperity and development? In the working-class neighborhoods stretching from Texas to Pennsylvania, the sight of small families with old cars parked in front of discount stores has become familiar. They walk together, the child sitting in the stroller, while the parents check the price of each item, holding a meticulously calculated shopping list. For low-income families, every penny must be considered, and each trip to the supermarket is a mental battle between needs and affordability. A father working 2 jobs shared, "Before, I could buy enough food for the whole week with $100. Now I can only buy half of what I used to, and I still have to leave out some of my child's favorite items." In that voice, there is fatigue, worry, and a hint of helplessness. It's not just his story, it's the reality for millions of American families trying to maintain a basic living amid inflation and stagnant wages. But now, even the discount stores that used to be a lifeline are starting to run out of stock, from rice and eggs to diapers and milk. And if you're lucky enough to still find them on the shelves, the prices are truly a challenge for thousands of families with meager incomes. When supply chains slow down, when shipping costs soar, and labor is in short supply, the places that used to serve the working class are the first to be affected. Shopping now is no longer about choosing the best items, but rather the ones left on the shelves and within budget. The impact is not just in the bill amount. It appears in every meal lacking vegetables, every night parents stay awake calculating just enough, every child's look when their favorite dish disappears from the dining table. The story of low-income families is not a distant tale. That is the reality happening every day, in small kitchens, where love must compensate for the shortages that they should not have to endure in a country once dubbed the land of opportunity. Across the rural areas and suburbs of America, there is a group of people who were once the pillars of society. Retired teachers, former factory workers, local library staff. After years of service, they now live on a fixed pension, a sum sufficient when everything was stable, but nearly powerless against the price storm sweeping through every shelf. A 74-year-old man in Missouri shared, "I have exactly $1,200 each month, and after paying for housing, medication, and insurance, I have less than $200 left for everything else, including food. Every time I go to the supermarket, I have to bring a calculator, because if I go over the limit, I won't have anything to eat next week." For those living on a fixed pension, any price fluctuations can potentially change their lives. They have no way to increase their income, cannot work overtime, or manage with side jobs like young people do. Their only option is to cut back, from nutritious meals and fresh produce, to even essentials like shampoo and toilet paper. When the familiar discount retail chains close down, when the discount programs disappear, this group of people will feel the impacts most acutely. They are not tech-savvy enough to order online at better prices, nor can they drive dozens of miles to shop, and thus they are at risk of being left behind. It seems that the system no longer prioritizes those who once built this country. Have you ever witnessed your parents or grandparents struggling to cut coupons, saving every penny, only to leave their shopping cart behind because the bill was too high? That's not an isolated incident. It's a reality unfolding across America, where those who once cared for society are now struggling daily to avoid going to bed with an empty stomach. In a country that once pledged, "No one will be left behind," perhaps it's time to ask ourselves, where are the elderly living on pensions in that promise? In the poor neighborhoods, in subsidized apartments or mobile homes hidden behind gas stations and pawn shops, millions of Americans are living day by day thanks to social welfare programs like SNAP, Medicaid, or housing vouchers. For them, each time they step into the supermarket is not a choice, but a matter of survival. "What can I buy to make it to the end of the month?" A single mother in New Mexico said, "I receive over $200 in SNAP benefits each month. But now, just into the third week, I've had to borrow ramen noodles from my neighbor." In a time when egg prices have doubled, milk is constantly in short supply, and even small packs of ground meat exceed the budget. The welfare cards that were once a lifeline are gradually losing their effectiveness. The issue here is not just the price. Many discount stores that once accepted food stamps have closed down because they couldn't survive after the pandemic, lacked inventory, or didn't have enough staff to operate. Affordable options are disappearing, leaving behind premium supermarkets that the poor can only look at through the glass. And when it comes to choosing between buying food or paying for medicine, many people have been forced to make sacrifices. No one wants to choose a life dependent on social welfare. But illness or life's upheavals may lead them to such circumstances. So at the very least, society should ensure they have a full meal to feel respected. Have you ever seen someone standing at the checkout, counting every penny with an embarrassed look? Or have you seen someone leave behind a piece of meat because it was too fancy for this month's budget? If so, remember, it is not a personal weakness, but a sign of a system cracking, where support once was a trust, now it has become a worry. Because in a civilized society, no one deserves to go hungry just because they need help. Have you ever witnessed such things around you? Please let us know. Before moving on to the next group, take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel, because we are always with you on this journey. A gentle reminder, this video is analytical and exploratory in nature, based on real phenomena and reputable public data. We do not intend to accuse or criticize any individual or organization. Thank you. Let's move on to the next group on this list. Freelancers. They are not unemployed. They are not lazy. In fact, many people work tirelessly every day. However, many freelancers in the US still have to face empty shelves and increasingly light grocery bags. They are gig workers, those who live off each Uber ride, each DoorDash delivery, each hour of cleaning an Airbnb. Unstable income, no long-term contracts, no health insurance, and especially no protection from the social security system like full-time employees. When gas prices rise, food prices increase, and housing costs go up, their incomes do not keep pace. They have only one option: to work more to cover the increasingly expensive and scarce life. A 62-year-old Uber driver in Texas shared, "I work 10 hours every day. When I get home, I only have the energy to eat instant noodles and sleep." When going to the market, he had to choose each item carefully, weighing every penny. Some weeks, he didn't dare buy milk because he was afraid of not having enough money for gas the next day. The sad thing is, this is not an isolated case. From big cities to small towns, millions of freelancers are being affected by empty shelves and skyrocketing prices. Not because they aren't trying, but because the current system seems to have no room for them. When convenience stores close, they don't have the time or money to run far to the suburban supermarket. When prices rise, they don't have contracts to demand wage increases. And when they are exhausted, they have no sick leave or insurance to rely on. Previously, we thought that hunger only happened to the unemployed. But now, it can affect anyone, including those who are still silently dedicating themselves day and night, without a voice, without support. Have you ever talked to a delivery person about their weekend dinner? You might be surprised to learn that the person delivering food to your door doesn't have enough to eat for themselves. In the peaceful rural areas of America, where people were once familiar with fields, free-range chickens, and weekend markets, now, to buy a carton of eggs or a few cans of soup, many have to drive more than 50 miles. According to reports, many rural areas in the United States are gradually becoming food deserts, where there are no large grocery stores, no cheap supermarkets, only small convenience stores with limited stock and exorbitant prices. A 70-year-old man in rural Arkansas recounts, "Before, I only needed to drive 10 minutes to buy groceries. Now the nearest supermarket has closed. The only thing left is the gas station with a few bags of chips, and the bread is all the hard packaged kind. Fresh vegetables. Every time we go, we have to gather enough for the whole week. Otherwise, we just have to eat instant noodles." In remote areas, a car is not a choice, but a necessity. But not everyone has the strength or the money to fill up their gas tank to drive dozens of miles just to buy essential groceries. When gas prices rise and food prices follow suit, each trip to the market becomes a headache, inducing calculation between finances and health. For the elderly who can no longer drive, or low-income individuals who cannot afford a new car, they have no choice but to rely on neighbors, the rare community bus, or skip meals. Now, as the shelves become increasingly empty, those living in rural areas once again face a greater challenge. The food shortage in the countryside is not as loud as in the city, but it is more silent and prolonged. Not because of a lack of resilience, but because the logistics, distribution and support systems have long forgotten them. Have you ever lived in the countryside and missed the feeling of stepping into the familiar grocery store? Now imagine you go back to that place and only see a sign saying permanently closed. If you have ever witnessed that, you will understand why in many rural areas, having a full meal has become a luxury. Workers in the service industry, from restaurant staff and retail employees to workers in small factories, are having to strive harder each day to survive in the context of rising food prices and shelves that sometimes have nothing left to buy. With low incomes and ever-increasing living costs, they can barely make ends meet, let alone save for emergencies or nutritious meals for their families. Working 12 hours a day in a restaurant, but each month I only earn enough to pay the rent and a few bills. When I go to the market, I can only look at the prices and take the cheapest items. Sometimes dinner is just a few slices of bread with butter. This is the sharing of a woman who works as a waitress at a restaurant in a poor neighborhood of Detroit. For her, every trip to the market is not a joy, but a worry about having enough money to buy the essentials for her family. For workers in the service industry, they not only have to endure low wages, but also face food shortages, Small stores often run out of stock, and when they do have items, the prices are doubled, making it impossible for them to buy enough essentials for their families. Food shortages are not just about seeing fewer items, but also about these workers feeling that they can no longer afford to feed their families. While prices keep rising, they can only work harder, get more exhausted, but their wages remain unchanged. This leads to meals that are lacking in quality, nutrients, and health, making them feel disappointed and helpless. You may have seen people doing this job, working hard all day, but only able to eat a simple meal at the end, just enough to get through the day. How can a wealthy country like the United States allow hard-working laborers like these to live in food scarcity? In the crowded neighborhoods, where high-rise buildings stand close together and life moves at a fast pace, there are still people facing very real food shortages. Although these areas often have no shortage of convenience stores and supermarkets, the prices of food are exorbitantly high, beyond their ability to afford. They are the poor workers, low-income earners living in big cities, possibly young families, renters, or those with unstable jobs. Every time I go to the supermarket, I can only buy the cheapest things, sometimes just enough for breakfast or dinner. But then, by midweek, when the fridge is empty, I have to face the reality that I can't buy more food because the prices are too high. This is the story of a single mother living in Brooklyn, New York. She said that while a large portion of the city's residents can shop easily, people like her struggle with every meal, worrying as food prices continue to rise. Although living in a prosperous city with all its conveniences, for this group of people, going to the market has become a major challenge. The supermarket near their home often runs out of stock, or the prices of goods are driven up due to shortages. Poor families or those living in urban areas with high population density cannot access quality food options. They can only turn to cheap food, but when prices soar, sometimes they are left with no choice but to eat meals that lack nutrients, which can have long-term health effects. No one can imagine that in a city filled with commercial establishments and conveniences, there are poor people who cannot buy enough food for their families. The feeling of anxiety when looking at food prices on the shelves, the helplessness of not being able to feed their children enough, makes many people think about their own future. Simple, low-nutrition meals have become their daily reality. Should we let people in urban neighborhoods endure food shortages while the city is still overflowing with goods? Is there a way to protect these families who are living in uncertainty, not knowing when their next meal will be? Millions of immigrants come to the US each year, hoping to find a better life for their families. However, for those coming from other countries, adapting to life in the US is not easy, especially when they face food shortages. The group of immigrants, especially the newcomers, live in areas with a high cost of living and often have to do manual labor jobs with low wages, making it difficult to cope with the constant changes in food prices. I worked all day in the restaurant, but when I got home and looked in the fridge, all I could find was some leftover rice and a few eggs. Honestly, I can't buy enough food for the whole family with my salary. This is the story of an immigrant mother from Mexico living in Los Angeles. Although she has a job, the high cost of living combined with her low income forces her to choose between buying food or paying other bills. These immigrants, when they first arrive in the US, often have to take unstable jobs without health insurance or social support. They rely on local stores and cheap food markets, but when these stores run out of goods, they have no other options. Cheap food, sometimes in the form of ready-made meals or canned goods, is the only option to sustain life. But in the context of rising prices, they are forced to face the reality of not having enough money to maintain a healthy diet for the whole family. Every day, these immigrants not only face financial difficulties, but also have to confront anxiety about the future. They worry whether they can continue to support their families as prices keep rising, when they no longer have enough resources to buy essential food. The unease, the difficulty of looking at empty shelves, is not just an individual issue, but a shared story of all those who are working and striving to make a living in this country. Is there a future where these immigrants do not have to live in fear of food shortages? Can government policies and solutions help them get through this period? These questions remain unanswered, but the truth is that millions of immigrants in the US are currently fighting to make ends meet and ensure that their families do not go hungry. For families with young children, the current food scarcity is truly a tremendous challenge. Their parents, especially those with low incomes or living in economically difficult areas, are struggling every day to maintain a healthy diet for their children. The situation of empty shelves and rising food prices has forced them into making heartbreaking choices. Families with young children need a complete and balanced diet to ensure their children's development. However, when grocery stores cannot supply enough goods or prices keep skyrocketing, they are forced to change their daily menus. Children's meals are no longer as varied as before. Fast food, processed meals, or canned foods have now become the main choices, even though it is well known that they do not provide the necessary nutrients. The lack of food not only affects the physical health of children, but also increases the anxiety of parents. They fear that their children will not develop healthily like other children when they are not provided with the necessary nutrition. They are also worried that their children will not have enough food to study and develop comprehensively. Additionally, some families face difficulties in accessing government food assistance programs. Programs like SNAP or other subsidy packages are not always sufficient to meet basic needs. When these supplies are no longer sufficient to support, families can only cut back on meals, reduce portion sizes, or even skip meals to survive. For families with young children, the lack of food is not just a matter of material scarcity, but also an emotional issue. How can we explain to the children that today they can't eat their favorite food, or have to eat less because there isn't enough money to buy groceries? How to maintain the mental stability of children when everything around them is not the same as before? That question still lingers in the hearts of many parents living in a state of food shortage like this. From elderly people living alone, low-income families, to parents struggling every day to raise their children, all are facing challenges that none of us could have imagined would come so soon. They not only lack food, but also peace of mind and choices, things that many of us can easily obtain in normal life. How to help those who are facing this difficult life, and how to find sustainable solutions for those most severely affected. Do you feel like you can do something to change this situation, or do you know any similar stories? Share your thoughts in the comments section below the video. If you find this video helpful and feel the need to speak out about this issue, don't forget to hit the subscribe and like buttons so you won't miss our upcoming videos. We will continue to monitor and share stories and important changes related to the lives of affected American citizens. This video was created for informational and analytical purposes, not to incite fear or provoke. The opinions shared in the video are based on available information sources and real-life stories. We encourage everyone to refer to reputable sources and actively seek more information on related issues. Thank you for watching. See you in the next videos.